and welcome to this edition of Taxtixs. We're really pleased to see you today, and we're going to be changing tax slightly differently and talking about a day in the life of a tax advisor. So what it's like from our perspective, what we see, both in terms of interaction with HMRC in the UK and with our clients, and just how that might help you to manage your business efficiently and understand how HMRC op by getting an insider's view. So, Tim, a day in the life of a tax advisor. What are some of the key things you're seeing at the moment that we can share with our
key things,
listeners?
Fair enough. Yeah, I think one of the key things is obviously the interaction we have with HMRCs. HMRC operate like many large businesses, seem to have segmented themselves into call centres. They effectively, there's 13, something like that, large offices around the country. Gone are the days where you could meet your local inspector down the local restaurant, making sure that they won't be paying cash for their meals and that sort of thing. So now it's very much sort of set up so that even us, when we're calling a call centre. We don't necessarily have direct access to individuals unless we're looking through an inquiry process, which I'm sure we'll talk about in a bit. But yeah, so it's become much more like a corporate venture, but the same way you're calling the gas board or BT or something. It's just you're calling somebody just at the end of the phone who's had very little training.
It's very anonymous, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think clients sort of expect that we will have a direct line into somebody that can answer our specific question, and quite often that's not the case, is it? Or certainly not immediately.
No, that's right. Yeah, they hired all the sort of the technical people behind this front of the call centre. So we get to call someone at least. So there is an agent dedicated line to try and skip the queue a little bit. Mm-hmm. And we get to speak to someone who's had a minimum of 12 months experience working for HMRC. But that's about it. They're not tax qualified or anything. Just people who have been there a bit longer, so know where to look on the systems for certain things. But if you've got a technical point you need raising, then it's normally good old-fashioned letter to be the best way. We don't even really have much in the way of email addresses because of the amount of fraudulent emails that have come out pretending to be from HMRC. HMRC have been very reluctant to use email unless you've got a specific person that you, again, going through an inquiry process perhaps.
Yeah.
But you can't really email HMRC just generally.
Well, certainly not to get a response that you can rely on.
Yeah, that's true. So, so it really just comes down to writing letters and waiting for their responses, good old-fashioned snail mail. And then you're down to the mercy of how long they take to come back to you.
Yeah, I mean, I see that a lot with my clients. So I specialise in VAT, your more corporate tax and personal tax as well. But, we have clients who obviously leave things to the last minute, as we all do, and they want a VAT registration in place yesterday. And, you're looking at a 40 working day turnaround time, and clients often are keen to expedite that if they can. But I mean, our hands are tied really. We can submit the applications, but other than chasing it up once a week, there's very little we can do.
Well, that's right. Yeah, because I think whilst HMRC are very good at giving us deadlines, they themselves don't really have much in the way of deadlines. So that if they sit on something for years, then that's their prerogative in some cases. There is supposedly the HMRC charter, which guarantees a sort of level of service to the customer, as they like to call them, the taxpayer. But even then, there's not really much you can do under that charter. I mean, you can complain under it, but you're not really going to achieve it.
You're still in a position where you're massively delayed anyway, probably by...
Yeah. I mean, you have to have tried a certain number of times before you can even get into their complaints process. And even then we found the complaints process has slowed up. We've taken 3 to 4 months just to get a response from their complaints team. So yeah, it's starting to fall apart a bit, I would say, particularly since sort of COVID times. It's not really picked up again, the service levels of HMRC. We used to say, yes, we'd have to write them a letter, but you get a response in 4 to 6 weeks. And very, very specific departments maybe.
I think it's very frustrating for clients and for us as the middleman, so to speak, because we're trying to manage the process, but we can only do so much. And, there might be occasions where you submit information to HMRC, you've told your client that you're expecting a response within 40 working days. And then at day 39, you might get a response from HMRC saying, thank you, but we need some further information, or thank you, but the documents we required haven't uploaded because of an error on our system. Can you please send them again? Right. And then you effectively start the clock again.
Yeah.
Which can be very frustrating.
there is no way to skip the queue, is there? You can't mark something as urgent and say, or even when you're responding to something they've sent to you, you just go back to the bottom of the pile. When they get to it, they get to it. So there is no skipping the queues at HMRC. It just doesn't work like that.
And you were talking before we started recording about National Insurance.
Yeah, the National Insurance Office, it just seems to be completely broken. We're being told that effectively turnaround times to submitting the forms, to writing letters, anything like that is effectively taking 15 months. So anything we submit now won't be responded to summer 2027, which is just
incredible,
ridiculous.
I mean, talk about customer service and any other business operated in that way.
Well, quite, yeah. And I mean, I did actually write to my MP about this because I was just like, I mean, it's all very well, like our clients are probably the better off ones, like we can at least explain that to them. But if you're, someone coming up to retirement and not represented and are trying to understand what your state pension is going to be, how many qualifying years you've got for state pension, and you write to HMRC and you hear nothing, you just start assuming they've lost the letter. You start panicking and worrying about it. I've heard stories about people really getting quite stressed about it. And it's just because it's the people involved in that sort of department. The people who actually need to contact that department aren't going to be of a certain age that you're going to want to know about. It's really the state pension that they're going to want to know about. If you've just started working, there's no real reason to contact the National Insurance Office most of the time. But yeah, it's really not good over there. It seems to have completely lost its way.
I mean, 15 months, that's incredible. I mean, during COVID, I know that VAT group applications were taking 12 to 15 months. That now has got a lot better. But yeah, obviously there's
exactly. We were kind of expecting them to go on a bit of a recruitment drive. We keep hearing there's more money available to HMRC every budget. The governments always stand up and say that. But it doesn't seem to have gone into that area, or at least maybe they're struggling to recruit. It seems to be there's a lot of recruitment advertisements out there at the moment, apparently. Yeah, they just seem to not be able to fill places in the team under a little bit of money in this particular time.
And you talking about the additional funding, there was an article recently in Accountancy Age which highlighted that 1 in 3 large companies are now subject to VAT investigations or compliance checks. So maybe that's where they're funding a lot of their resource and budget. So, that's something for businesses just to...
Yeah, I appreciate HMRC, like everyone else, they've got priorities and where they're going to actually try and effectively they've got targets, haven't they? So where they're going to get the most money, they're not going to get the most money responding to, older people trying to understand their enquiries. Yeah, that's not really their priority. So we've seen it on the direct tax side. They put a lot of money into looking at R&D claims for a long time. I believe that's started to reduce a little bit now and going back into more general inquiries. But yeah, I think, a few years ago, before sort of COVID times, you used to get inquiries just opening into maybe a company tax return saying, can you let me have a breakdown of these expenses? Haven't seen one of those for 5 years. Just not really on their radar. They've got bigger fish to fry, as you say, but it's more the larger company on the VAT side. They seem to blame the OMBs more on the direct tax side. That's one of the reasons they brought in the simple making tax digital, which we've spoken before about on podcasts, because they seem to suggest that the unrepresented smaller taxpayers are actually responsible for the largest part of the tax gap in the unpaid. It is to some degree, but I think the impression out there in the general public is that it's the large PLCs who are not paying their tax, whereas HMRC's impression is that it's the, your window cleaners and your taxi driver and your smaller self-employed people who are not paying their tax. So that's who they seem to be targeting, rightly or wrongly.
Yeah, I mean, even before this article came out, we'd seen, because sort of in the run up to before COVID and then during COVID, there were almost no VAT compliance checks at all. And then since then, I would say from sort of 22, 23, we've seen a gradual increase. And now every single first VAT return of a business that's a repayment return will get checked. And then every return that's a repayment and is probably over 100,000 will be checked as well. So we almost know for sure which ones will be checked. But then we're also seeing, I would say, over the last 12 months, just ad hoc compliance checks coming in. And these are for small to medium-sized businesses. So really, it's important that businesses are sure about the data that makes up their returns and that data is accurate and they're reflecting the right amount of VAT in terms of how much they're claiming and how much they're paying as well.
You find they're open sort of fellow inquiries, or they're just asking about the odd question?
Yeah, definitely more full inquiries. So we had one recently where HMRC wanted to check the last 4 years. They've picked a VAT quarter from each of the last 4 years randomly. Wow. They want an in-person meeting to discuss the results of the information that we've provided. And it's most likely that they will then expand that review to cover the entire 4 years rather than just that sample, because it has unearthed a number of errors. So, and I think that most businesses will make errors, but I suppose if they're larger and consistent, HMRC are going to be more concerned.
It's interesting you said about they're trying to, they want personal meetings about that stuff, because when we had, there was a sort of glut on the R&D side when they were doing a lot of inquiries into that. We were desperate to try and get in front of these people to have a conversation and really explain to them what's going on, and they just would not meet us in person. It's strange the different sort of approaches and departments take at HMRC.
Yeah, and sometimes it's really wanted, and other times we actually don't think it's necessary. So, for example, we have a client of the firm who has a number of different companies, who has been active in development of properties for a number of years. And we know that the large repayment is due to a very particular issue, which could be dealt with by a very short email exchange. But HMRC have insisted on coming out to the client's premises and blocking out 2 to 3 hours. And it just feels like a waste of everybody's time. It's a waste of HMRC's time, waste of our time, waste of the client's time. And we've had this with them several times where HMRC come out and we just literally start the meeting by saying, some background would be really useful here. This is what the client does. This is how, this is their business model, and this is the reason for the repayment. And then it's over in sort of 20 to 30 minutes. But they will not accept that either over the phone or via email. They insist on having a face-to-face meeting, and then it will be cut short.
Or indeed on the Teams call or something nowadays.
So frustrating times.
Yes, sounds like it, yeah.
We've also seen a few, I know you were talking about nudge letters. We've seen a few go out to businesses, clients of ours, where I think the corporation tax filings have indicated a certain amount of turnover in the business. Right. And HMRC have then linked that to whether or not the business is VAT registered, and then sent rather threatening letters to the businesses saying, you do not appear to be VAT registered. Based on your turnover, you should be VAT registered. And obviously that sends the fear of God through businesses, doesn't it? But actually, it's a bit unfair, or very unfair, because quite often these businesses might be making exempt supplies, which means they don't have a liability to be registered. Or maybe their customers are based outside the UK, which again means they wouldn't need to be registered. There are a number of reasons why their turnover would exceed the VAT registration threshold, but they still wouldn't have that requirement to be registered. So, just be wary of these letters from HMRC. They may seem very sort of apocalyptic, but actually, oftentimes there isn't anything to worry about.
Yeah, no, it's interesting you sort of reference it like that, because I do feel like there's a lot of different reactions to HMRC from our client base as well. You get the ones that really just, tell HMRC to go away, and then quite an aggressive stance towards them. And other ones, you say, as soon as a letter hits the doormat of the HMRC logo, they just lose sleep. So it's a whole gamut of reactions to how people approach HMRC. And we're sort of in the middle of that, trying to make sure everyone's, so if you're more reactionary to it, then fine, we're here to hold your hand and help you get through that. And if you're more on the aggressive stance, maybe rein you back in a bit, going, well, this isn't helpful if you start using a coarse language out there or anything like that. That's not really the approach we would suggest, but there's ways to be diplomatic and still firm in our beliefs when we do have sort of cases where HMRC are just being ridiculous and overstepping the mark. Because the way that sort of HMRC works, they do just sort of follow their internal manuals as if that is gospel, whereas the legislation may say something different. There may be case law that says something different, but until you get in front of the next level, which would be the solicitors at HMRC, then they just if it doesn't say it in their manuals, they won't adhere to it, will it? You do get quite frustrated sometimes going, no, you're wrong, but I don't care what it says in your manual. That's not what the legislation says. It hasn't been updated, or it was written wrong. So it can be a bit of a headache just trying to get your message across to HMRC, particularly when they won't meet you. It has to be done by letter. So it can be difficult at times.
I suppose that's another interesting point, isn't it? HMRC's manuals and how that whole thing operates. So for businesses that aren't aware, HMRC will have a set of tax manuals. They have it across all the taxes, And it's really sort of a way of educating their officers on the ground around how certain transactions or treatment should be applied to the businesses. But really, that is their interpretation. And of course, the key thing to know is that you must go to the legislation first and foremost. And then if that's unclear, you might look at that case law. But the manuals and their internal guidance is just literally that. It's a tool of interpretation. And quite often you get officers that will look at that and say, well, computer says no.
Yeah.
And it's a case of trying to educate them and say, well, this is an unclear area of the legislation, or, actually we've got this agreement which suggests otherwise, and sort of just walking them through that. But again, that takes a lot of time, doesn't it?
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, but you're right. It is just sort of intended for internal purposes, but at the same time, it gives you some insights as to how they're supposed to approach these things. So you can also use it to your advantage on occasions. So like there was the whole thing about MPs flipping properties a decade ago now, but that was actually written in the HMRC manuals. That was perfectly acceptable, which is where that sort of came from, that people could do that. And so there are things in there that are to your advantage as well as disadvantages. It tends to be a good place to look, just so you have the insight as to what's going on in HMRC's approach, because that, as we've learned from experience, is how they will approach an inquiry, as you said, rightly or wrongly. But at least you know then what you're dealing with. If you do disagree, you need to be ready to fight that if they then come up with their interpretation. But also, you've seen it in case law, the flip side, where you go, well, this is what it says in your manuals, and then they've changed their mind during the course of an inquiry and said, well, the manuals aren't legislation, therefore they are perfectly entitled to not follow their manuals as well. And then there's the whole thing about expectation, whether you're allowed to rely on those manuals and say publicly issued information, whether that amounts to guidance, and if you followed that, should you be then penalised? There have been cases around that as well.
Yeah.
It just makes you throw your hands up in the air and go, well, what am I supposed to do?
As a taxpayer, what is my legitimate expectation here? Yeah. Well, it's a minefield, isn't it? Yeah. It's a daily challenge for us working with HMRC and trying to manage the expectations of our clients at the same time. But yeah, we do our best. And I guess the point is just to be one step ahead to the extent that you can. If you've got any proposed changes in your business structure, the nature of your supplies, and you're not sure about the VAT treatment of that, then come and speak to us, and we will help you navigate the unruly
indeed.
HMRC.
Because the tax legislation changes on almost a daily basis. There's another sort of statutory instrument or some interpretation, or there's a new case that's come out that may change the approach to something. Yeah, it's a constant changing goalpost. So we have access to all that information. I'm reading case law on a daily basis to keep up with it all, because that's the only way to do it, really. But it is mindful. So definitely come speak to us if you're looking to do it.
Yeah. Okay, so that's that for today's Taxtixs. Hopefully you've got an insight into how HMRC operate and the challenges that you as a business and us as tax advisors face in that. So thank you very much for joining us, and look forward to seeing you on the next edition.